So, hello, welcome to our July Uspire Discover webinar. And these webinars, we started quite a while back actually, where one of our key visions is to inspire and create the finest commercial leaders in the world. And we started these webinars just to do that, to be able to bring some value once a month on a topic that's hopefully resonate with our
With
audience.
our audience.
Today, oh, I've got a little bit of a, what's going on there?
What's going
How weird. Never mind. Okay, so yeah, it resonates with our audience. We have got something to tell you. And what we've got to tell you is that in January, Uspire has partnered with a company called Business Doctors. Some of you may know this. Some of you are from Business Doctors. If you are, hello. And we've partnered with a company called Business Doctors, and Business Doctors work with SMEs, small to medium enterprises, to support them to grow with practical hands-on support. And this is the very first time we've had the opportunity to collaborate on a webinar with our Business Doctors partners. And I'm absolutely delighted that my partner Ryan, hi, I can see you there in my top corner. Ryan is going to be working with us today. Ryan has had a very long career already, and I know he only looks young, but he's had a very long career in learning and development, actually, with a number of different businesses. And he's also done 10 years as an Army reservist, focusing on talent and recruitment and all those people elements. And then in the last 3 years, he's been a business doctor and been supporting his clients, his businesses, to grow their businesses. And today, what he's going to do with us, he's going to share a 10-step process to grow a business. And he's going to tell us some stories about the things that he's done and the way that he's helped those businesses along the way. So, Ryan, I'm just so delighted to welcome you to our very first collaboration webinar. Ryan.
Brilliant. Thank you, Amanda. And thank you. Thank you for the introduction. Colin looks very young. Well, thank you very much. I think it was just the fact that my paper round when I was younger was downhill. That's all it was. So thank you for the introduction, and looking forward to actually talking you through these the 10 steps that we use at Business Doctors. So what I wanted to do is just start off with it doesn't matter whether you're an SME or not, in actual fact, because the 10 steps really does help everyone. So I want you to imagine anything from small or medium-sized business where it's entrepreneur owned and operated, all the way through to, it might be a corporate department. You might be leading a whole department that's been given a specific job to do within an organization. And the 10 steps continues to be used across all of that spectrum. So what does it do, and why do we have it? So at Business Doctors, we constantly and in various different ways get asked, oh, could you help us with this? Or could you talk to us about this? Or we're struggling with this. Where do we start? So the whole point of the 10 steps is for us to deliver a strategic review, a single point in time where we review everything, and then we say, right, let's have a look in the right direction now, rather than trying to wear multiple hats and do multiple things all at once and spin all those plates. So the way I would boil it down is we work to give clarity and direction to those leaders that are frustrated, ambitious, or challenged by something in their organization, and they want to do something about it. So you should all have access to the chat. And what I'd like to see from you is which one of those camps you sit in right now. Are you frustrated with something in your responsibility? Are you ambitious about an opportunity that you can take hold of? Or are you challenged by something and not too sure what to do about it, or what you could do about it? And you'll see that's a whole spectrum. So give me a yes, they're all three. Thank you very much. Give me a couple of things in the chat, and I'll be able to pick up on them and use them throughout the next 45 minutes. Absolutely, Amanda. Frustrated, ambitious, or challenged. Doesn't matter what it is, but how do you feel? What do you resonate towards right now?
Justin is challenged. Quite a few people got challenged.
Oh,
2 people ambitious.
me, that's a little old me.
Fantastic. Ambitious and challenged. Many ambitious and challenged.
Perfect. Okay, we've got lots of ambitious, yeah, and lots of challenge. Brilliant. Okay, well, this bit will definitely resonate with you then. So we don't just look at that individual operation, department, or company solely. So if you think about a small or medium sized organization that is owner operated, you will probably, and I'm sure I'll see your heads nodding right now, is that you wear multiple hats as the shareholder, the exec team, and the delivery team. And actually, some of that frustration can come from the fact that you wear so many hats and you have to be so many things to so many people. So a lot of where we start, and we take a little bit from Simon Sinek here, on the very first step is why. So he tells us start with why, and we do exactly that. So even if we're looking at an individual organization, we'll always go all the way back to the shareholders and ask the original question: why does this organization exist in the first place? What is it supposed to do? And actually, we use a really controversial word. We ask them to be selfish. We want you to be really, really selfish just for the next 5 minutes while we ask you that question. What is it that you were trying to do or are doing when you set this organization up? Because it's really, really important. Because often we can be really busy fools and we build a thing and it ends up being hugely successful or unsuccessful, but we're still miserable about it. And we can be miserably successful because we built a great thing, but it wasn't the thing that we wanted in the first place. So we always go back with why. And sometimes that's the absolute core of our frustrations of frustrated, challenged, or ambitious. So that's the very first thing. And we also look at personal aspirations. So we don't just broad brush it, we look at individual aspirations, because we could have multiple stakeholders or even multiple shareholders, etc. So the next bit, unsurprisingly, is step 2, which is where we open up the idea of values and beliefs. And we get rid of some of the more fluffy words like values and beliefs that have multiple connotations, and we just use the word DNA. What is the DNA of this business? And that's a mixture, and let's not get down to semantics. That's a mixture of values, beliefs, mission statements, purpose, and all these different things. And we figure out what is it that we've actually got, and are we happy about it? And that can start to feed into the exec, because the exec team, so whether that is the directors running the business, or it might even be the day-to-day operator that's the owner operator, or it could be the managers running that department or the heads of department, etc. They actually control and influence that culture. And they actually stand for what is acceptable and what isn't. And sometimes, I'm sure you've all been part of departments and organizations that have accepted poor culture and haven't done anything about it. And we'll see later on how that's really unhelpful. And then the next bit is step 3, and that's purpose. So we don't dwell on all the different things that get written in the reception area on the wall that means nothing to anyone. Now, just roughly speaking, I can already see a couple of smiles there. Have you seen an organization that has values and beliefs, and 1, nobody knows what they are, and 2, you just laugh when you read them because it sounds like everybody else's? Yeah. So what I do here is I do a little bit of an exercise, and I forget all of that, and I call it the moments of truth. When that shareholder set up that business, they had core values, core beliefs, and they had a purpose. And there were moments that they wanted to replicate as a business. And I'm sure there are things that you do within your departments, within your organizations, your companies, or whatever it might be, that really make you proud and you want to protect. And sometimes, every now and again, you'll hear it. It will come out of people's mouth. They'll say, well, why are we doing that? Because it's the right thing to do. It's the right thing to do according to who? Now, you might have actually caught on to a value or a core purpose. So I'll give you a really high-flying one. So I chose one that everyone will have heard of, which is Microsoft. And their core purpose is to empower every person and every organization on the planet to achieve more. And if the thing that we are doing does that, then it's the right thing to do. If it cuts against it, then it's against our purpose and we shouldn't. And that's what your values, beliefs, and DNA should be telling you. It's not really nice words printed lovely on a nice poster at the back of the reception desk. And so we really pragmatically get to the bottom of that straight away, literally at step 3. So there you go. What we then do is we get straight to the customer, because it's all well and good having a purpose, all having a good reason for being, but you have to connect that to your customer. And usually we end up reframing what that purpose is to bring the customer back into the room. And you quite literally have to do it, because quite often we have these values and this purpose that's a little bit more about what we do and less about why we're doing it and who we're doing it for. So we spend just a little bit of time reframing that to make sure that we've got a solid foundation to get started. Now, all of that I've just told you in that first third of the 10 steps is what we call the start of our strategic review. And quite often it causes arguments, because you've got shareholders, you've got an exec, you might even have a small team of the delivery team around one table, and everyone's version of events is a bit different. And someone pulls out an old version of the values, and maybe someone at some point pulls out a shareholder agreement or things like that. And that's why we do the reframe, and we do it in a single point in time. Where is everybody right now? And it takes flip charts sometimes, and with the moments of truth, sometimes it takes a little bit of an exercise with brown paper all the way around the room, and we've mapped out the customer journey. And sometimes it's really easy because they are absolutely 1000% clear on what it is that they need to do. But that's the first third. So I'm going to share with you just a really quick story now of a client recently. We're still working with them right now, called Stonewall Security. And we were trying to figure out what it is that we needed to do in order to grow the business. And the single moment that resonated both, and Claire would share this with us. I don't think she's on the call today, but she absolutely would. So I asked the question, your team, when they need to make a decision, do they do what's right for Stonewall and Stonewall's customers, or do they do what they think Claire and Martin want? And that was a totally defining moment, because what they'd realized is they were a huge bottleneck to their own growth just by existing. Because what they'd created was a culture of people that worked to them, not to their business. And therefore, if they didn't work to their business, they didn't work to the customer. And that was the biggest unlock, where we then had to completely reframe what it is that we do, what it is that the senior management team is tasked to do, and everything that sits beyond it. And it was really important for us to do that early on, because you can imagine, how could we possibly grow if everyone was just trying to make 2 directors happy and had completely forgot to have the customer in the room. So there was a little story, and hopefully that resonates a little bit. Maybe you've heard that before in a similar guise. Okay, so we've done that now. We've set up what it is that we want to do, and we finally put some numbers on it. How are we going to define success? So if we know what we've got to work on, we work on key performance indicators. So how are we actually going to find and define that success? And similarly, we've got our objective key results. What is the number that we're working to? So that's the first third. Do we have any questions so far? I'll open it up to the floor, because, of course, I could just talk forever, but we have got time to take any questions.
We need to host first. Jake, you can do it.
I've got
Ryan, I've got one for you.
Yeah, please.
When you talk about key performance indicators, how do you broaden that to what used to be called a balanced scorecard, almost like non-business numbers, but really important measures?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, actually, we have to do it twice because we have to define how they currently define success. And then we have to do it again at around about step 10, actually, which I'll tell you about. Because what we're likely to do is change the plan. Or redefine how we define that success. Sometimes it's strong, sometimes it's put on us, right? So I always talk about mountains, um, in the age old, my team, their objective should add up to mine, and mine and my peers should add up to my bosses, right? And that almost creates a mountain. And if there's a hole in that mountain, then there's a hole in the KPIs and there's a hole in performance. So hopefully that answers your question. Does anybody else have a question?
I've got a question actually. When you talked about that people work for the business and the customer, and then sometimes it's in any size business, you're working for the leaders. So in the case of an SME, possibly founding directors, family business, or whatever it might be. How do you point that out to them?
You're absolutely right. And actually, this is where there's a good bit of use by that comes into this, which is coaching, right? We can only perform with what we've got. The organization will always be in its own being. It's always made up of the people that are within it. So when we are coaching that out of them, and it's a really difficult thing to do at Business Doctors, because if you look at the true sense of coaching, it's certainly not to tell, and it's certainly not to do, right? But it's almost a thing that we add on to the end at Business Doctors, which is if we've defined what it is that we now need to do, and we've coached that out of you, and you're absolutely committed, but then still need a little bit of help, then we're more than willing to do that as well. So sometimes it's
I guess, yeah. Thank you.
Any more, or shall I carry on?
Check the chat. Yeah, no, you're good.
Perfect. Okay. Right. So I can see many are busily writing notes. So we're now up to step 5. And this is where we play a game. This is where we have a look at the future and we play a game of snakes and ladders. So if you think of the biggest snake within our industries, and it affected everybody in recent times, you would say COVID, right? It absolutely, within our game, was a snake right in front of us. We couldn't have seen it coming. But it's never normally as bad as COVID. There are normally snakes within our operations that we possibly, had we spent a little bit of time just thinking about it, we could have spotted, and we could have come up with an alternative plan, or at least a disaster recovery plan. But similarly, the same for ladders. There are opportunities that pop up at last minute, and because we're not prepared for them, we can't take full advantage of them and really use that opportunity that's ahead of us. Now, you can look at lots of different ways of doing this. So we break it right down. We first of all have a look at what is the landscape that we're operating in. What is the social landscape? We then have a look at the technological, and then the economical, and then, of course, the political. Now, for all of you eagle-eyed, you'd think, well, I've heard of these before. I've heard of Pestle, I've heard of Steeple and stuff like that. And you're right, it is absolutely those things. But we don't dwell on them. In fact, we get our clients and the people that we're working with to do that work up front, because that isn't the work. The work is to identify out of those themes, what are the snakes, what are the ladders, and so what? Because it's all well and good knowing that there's a bump in the road ahead of you or there's an opportunity, but so what? What are we actually going to do about it? So I'm again going to ask you the question, and we'll use the chat again. Straight away, when I said we're going to play a game of snakes and ladders, and this is what lies ahead, I saw a load of faces smile. Because you clearly thought of something. So I want you, that thing that you thought of, don't think any more about it. Tell me what your first snake and your first ladder lying ahead of you is. Tell me in the chat. Brilliant. Thank you, Mark. A ladder, I like it. Jamila, that was perfect. Ladder, finding the right value proposition. Perfect. I'm going to talk about that in just a second. Snake, not understanding the market. I'm going to talk about that even sooner. That's the next step. Snake, need for funding. Yeah, absolutely. Perfect. Thank Colin, playing snakes, ladders, and elephants. I like that. Thank you. Brilliant. Okay. Can you see how immediately it starts to open up the idea that you want to do some analysis? You start asking yourself question after question after question. It's kind of, okay, so what? So what? And you could ask that forever, right? And if you were truly mentoring someone here, you would ask that question so many times. So that's where we now do the analysis. And sometimes this can take multiple sessions. Sometimes it's really quick. It depends what data is available to you. What it certainly isn't, or if it is, we call it out, it's not opinion. And we're also very careful about who's being represented in the room. So if we were to talk about market conditions to a sales team, it's going to be everything but the sales team. And if we did exactly the same to operations, it's going to be everything but capability. And quite often when we ask that question of two personalities in the room that way, they don't get on and they don't agree. So it has to be true core analysis. So what do we look at? Well, the very first thing we look at is what's our business mix? What markets are we actually in? And sometimes if we really looked at our purpose, we really open up what markets we might want to be in. Because sometimes it's just a case of we're selling one product to one market and we have been really quite tunnel visioned about it. And I've got a little story about that in just a second. We then have a look at competition. Now, competition is a really obvious one. You've got your direct competition. However, direct competition doesn't cost you money. Indirect competition costs you money because it's silent. So the example I would use here is that if you were a gym, your obvious competition is the gym down the road. However, your indirect competition is a bigger pot of money than that. It's things like healthier eating and other products and services that are available around fitness. That's an even bigger industry that's vying for the pot of money that your client wants to spend. So your direct competition is probably the least of your worries. And the next thing we look at is key relationships. So, of course, we want to look at the demographic of customers, but similarly, we want to influence our key referrers and our key relationships that get us to those customers. And quite often, if you look at more service-based organizations, that's really, really key and often gets missed. And gets missed on an epic scale as well, because there certainly is never a plan, and I've absolutely rarely seen this. There has never been a marketing plan for key referrers. It's always been direct to customer and the final person that's going to spend the money. We then have a look at products and service mix, and you can bring out the good old 80-20 rules here. We also have a look at what our key customers are. If I was to ask the majority of businesses, they will define their key customers, whoever shouts the loudest and whoever spends the most money. And that couldn't be furthest from the truth on a lot of occasions. You know, you have mid-road customers that are really easy to look after. And if you really looked at it, they are your absolute prime customer. Your biggest customer cost you the biggest amount of money to serve. And your smallest customers sometimes are that easy that you barely notice you've got them. But maybe you're underserving them when they were small because you haven't looked after it. So we have a look at all of that analysis. What we then do is we just take a breath. You've done loads of analysis, you're full of ideas now, but take a breath, because you have all experienced this as customers. That brand that you absolutely love goes and stops doing the thing that you love them for because nobody told them it was a good idea, and they just stopped doing it. They wanted to diversify, they wanted to change, they wanted to grow, and they stopped doing the thing that the customers really, really loved. Earlier on, I talked about moments of truth. These are absolutely key. And just to give an absolute example, how much dismay did Cadbury's create when they changed their recipes and changed it from dairy milk? Did they really take stock of their moments of truth there? That's a big question, right? So what we do is we get our organization to look in the mirror. And if you are a solo entrepreneur or a smaller business, this is like giving yourself a pat on the back. And we know that we don't do that in the SME world. We're not allowed to give ourselves a pat on the back. We have to just try harder all the time. So we force our clients to do this. We figure out, what are you absolutely great at? Because if you are great at it, it's probably part of your value proposition, and it's probably part of your key differentiator. It's probably the thing that makes customers want to buy from you. Please don't stop doing it because nobody told you that it was good. The next thing is you have a look at your improve, and we box that off. As SMEs, we constantly, that's all we look at, is how do we improve, how do we improve, how do we improve? And finally, we have a look at where we're vulnerable. These are the things that we have to do straight away that actually leave us really vulnerable. But what we bring that round to is something called our edge, and it turns into our value proposition. Too often, our value proposition revolves around cost and how much it costs to deliver our service. You would not believe, and I'm sure you can all appreciate it, just how much of a market you have to control in order to play with margin. It's absolutely not worth it. And to bring that home, to bring one of the biggest companies I know, let's use McDonald's, everybody knows McDonald's, for them to bring a really competitive price on a burger, look how much of the industry they have to own. And we're not just talking about the fast food industry, how much of the land industry they have to own, how much of the advertising industry they have to own. And they not have to own it, they have to control it to keep their competitors out. If you're an SME and you're trying to compete on cost, you are doing it wrong. And that's probably the first time that we will absolutely say that's almost a categoric tell. So what do we do instead? We have a look at what is the differentiator of this business. What is it that you do differently? You can't just do the same as everybody else, because you've got the good old adage of you're going to have to do it faster, more quality, or cheaper. And we know we don't want to operate like that. So what's your differentiator? So long as you've nailed that, and then you nail exactly who your niche is, then you can turn that into a statement. And that statement is your value proposition. What is it that you do differently for who? And if you sprinkle on there your moments of truth, you've almost got a perfect customer journey along with a perfect proposition. So that's that bit. That is the middle section where we do the analysis of what our strategy is going to be. And that was step 7 just there. From there, we then start having a look at the third section, which is to drive results. But what I want to do is I just want to very quickly tell you a little bit of a story about how that analysis can really open up something. And that's with an organization that we're working with right now called Fast Exocet. Fast Exocet is a fuels additive company. So to give you a really short excerpt there, they are in the world of an industry that is declining rapidly, with the whole idea that fuel and combustible engines is being used less, but they want to grow in that market that is shrinking. And the big question is, how do we do it? And it's not actually how do we grow and totally survive. Part of it is, how do we be the last ones out to turn the lights off? How do we survive that long, right? So the biggest thing that we've done, and I'll cut to the absolute crux of it, is that we've opened up a brand new market. So they've traditionally opened and operated in the UK, and we're now going to operate in India, because we realise there's a market there and there's a way to do it. And now we're putting together the actual plan to do exactly that. So it's not just here's an idea, it's here's an idea, here's the analysis, and this is exactly how we're going to do it as a team, and we'll support them in doing that. So that's a little bit on Fast Exocet. So in the chat, that analysis piece there, what resonates with you the most? Because I can see lots of pensive looks now. A little bit of Rob Merritt, that was definitely a pensive look. That's a very good one. Thank you. Very strong. Give me your initial thoughts right now. What is it you're thinking about? James on value proposition, that's great. Jamila, that's a really good question. So I'll read that out. So how do you balance analysis and having to get results fast to show business growth? You're absolutely right. And sometimes we're under pressure to do that, aren't we? So we do it from two parts. So we know that question is always coming. And that's why at the very, very start, we work out what is the appetite of the shareholders and similarly the stakeholders. And we realign them and reframe the whole thing to be realistic. Because if we just let them tell us, we want to grow faster, bigger now. And everybody wants that, right? So we look at what's actually reasonable, what can be achieved. We reframe the first parts, and then what we also do is we have a look at those KPIs that were set, look at how realistic they are based on what they've done so far. So one of the bits that I didn't quite talk about there is we have a little go at looking in the mirror, because if you are going to demand that we need to grow faster than we ever have before, well, why haven't we already done it? So what can we already learn from just looking in the review mirror? Amanda, we all as business leaders need to prioritize time to look in the rearview mirror. Perfect. Yeah, you absolutely were thinking exactly the same as me there. Brilliant. Superb. Okay. Lots of pensive thoughts. I think there's an awful lot of notes being written down there. Okay, so let's move on now to, we've now looked in the mirror. We've had a good amount of analysis and we've planned the route of what it is that we're going to do. What markets are we going to open? What direction are we kind of going to go in? We now need to drive those results. We're going to have to do something about it. And this is where we as business doctors really earn our crust. Because the last thing that you want from the work that we are going to do is a nice fancy printout of a PowerPoint deck that says, this is what you told us. And we'd love for it to just go in your drawer, gather dust, and one day you'll put it out and go, we were talking about that 12 months ago. That's the last thing that we want, because there is absolutely no value there whatsoever. So driving the results makes all the difference. So the very first thing that we're going to do is help you find your focus. You can't do it all at once, but what needs to give now? And that's a culmination of the parts that we found where we're vulnerable, the opportunities across snakes and ladders, and similarly, some of the jobs and projects that would be opened up right at the very start. And the core one usually is, are we sure we're doing the right thing and selling the right products? Like, are we absolutely sure? Or is there something else we could possibly do? And that usually opens quite a bit of discussion. So what we then do is we help the business ensure that it doesn't trip over itself by having 4 critical success factors and lanes within the projects that we're now going to deliver. The very first one is ridiculously obvious. It's sales and marketing. Sales and marketing probably have to have a step up within the organization. Now, for an SME, that's really obvious, you know, sell more stuff and you make more money. That's a really obvious one. But what about if we're talking about a department? A department, maybe a finance department within a corporate. Well, actually, you have to sell and market yourself within the organization in order to get buy-in from the other departments to be able to work as a team to reach the goals that you're trying to work to. It's not a silo. I'm sure we've heard all that term before. So that's sales and marketing. The next piece is people performance. We are absolutely greater than the sum of our parts. And if we've got great parts, we can be greater than that sum, right? So it's all about people. And if we put this in a really core way, and I can see Claire from Web HR Consultancy will absolutely agree with me here. They are our most valuable asset. They can do the most for us, but it's the most difficult to influence. You can make change immediately when it comes to anything else, but when it comes to the human resource, sometimes that takes time, and we need to really think about it. The next critical success factor is financial performance, because ultimately we're probably going to point out that there will need to be an investment in order to get a return. See how I just said ROI backwards? And a lot of our leaders don't appreciate that. They want return before they commit to the investment. So sometimes we have to reframe that for them. And then the final piece is systems and operations. Now, the reason we call them our 4 critical success factors is if you grow one faster than another or grow one slower than the others, you will trip over yourself. Can you imagine if you oversell and don't develop your systems and process to be able to keep up? Can you imagine if you over-recruit and then you've not got the financial performance to support it? Can you imagine if you develop core systems and process and you invest in lots of machinery and all those different things, but you just don't have the sales to back it up? So there has to be a full relationship there for it to work. All 4 of those critical success factors have to work together. And we run projects within them. And it's as simple as that. Once you've defined those projects, what you probably found is that you've got a few holes and a few opportunities. And we call it pressing the reset button, which is our step number 9. And the whole idea of pressing the reset button is sometimes you just have to stop. And I'm sure you've all seen the picture before, and give us a wave if you had and a nod. Have you all seen the picture of the cavemen that are pushing a car with square wheels, and there's the bloke that has invented the round wheel and they haven't got time to appreciate it? You really want to shout at that picture and just say, just stop, just for a second. I'm not saying round wheels is a great idea, but I'm definitely telling you square ones is terrible. So we might as well just stop and ask the question. And this is where we call it square pegs in round holes. Now, if you really think about it, and I know my daughter, she's 6 months old right now, she's got one of these games. If you really try, you can get a round peg in a square hole. And if I'm honest, as a dad, I've played with those toys and I can make it happen. But there's big gaps in it, isn't there? And sometimes that square peg doesn't fit in the round hole at all and can't get involved whatsoever. So actually, we have to make a bit of a plan. And sometimes that revolves around our people too. Now, you can't just straight away say, right, okay, we're currently a £1 million business. We'd like to be a £10 million business. So we're going to recruit enough people to be £10 million. It's a bit of a journey, right? And the journey certainly isn't a straight line. It's A to B via C, sometimes may or may not include D. So what we talk about here is actually there's an awful lot in your armory. Let's take people for an example. You might have people that you would like to do better. Your human resource can improve. And quite often as small, medium organization owners and operators, we jump straight to give them a pay rise, give them a pay rise. That'll keep them happy. And that's literally only one of 6 things you could possibly do. and it's certainly the sixth that I would explore, because you've got loads of other options. Naturally, we've all had jobs where a pay rise wouldn't cut it. I just want you to say thank you and tell me that I'm doing a great job, and I'll do more of it. Sometimes it might be just a case of, if you just say well done in front of everyone, I'd be dead happy for the whole weekend, for the next month, for the next year. Sometimes I just need to be totally re-engaged. I don't actually know what it is I'm supposed to be doing here. And similarly, I don't want you to know that I don't know what's going on, so I'm just going to pretend. But what you're going to see is poor performance. So there's an awful lot that we can do here, and there's an awful lot of interventions. And quite obviously, it'd be absolutely remiss of me not to talk about training, because retraining that individual might be something that will not only give us better skill, experience, behaviours, etc., but it will re-engage them. There's nothing better than learning a new skill and feeling altogether more helpful within an organisation. So that's our ninth step of press the reset button and start to look at, draw a line in the sand. Where is it that we actually need to make effect and change right now? And you can do that across all 4 of your critical success factors. Now, the final 10th step, because it's still feeling like a bit of a report, a bit of a hierarchy, a bit of a wouldn't it be nice if, and we could print it off and put it into the drawer. Well, we do it a little bit differently. So what we then produce is a battle rhythm. And what we mean by that is we take that away and we produce exactly what you're expecting. You're expecting a report. That's exactly what we do. We'll give you one, but we replay it back to you. This is in the strategic review, and you can do that to yourself, where we come back together and we say, do you know, just a week ago or 2 weeks ago, this is what we were saying. This is what we committed to. Does this sound right? Have we had any reflections, any rethoughts on any of it? Brilliant. And we replay that back to 2 people. We replay it back to the shareholders and say, have you given the exec the direction that they need in order to enact all of this? And we also give it back to the exec and say, have you given the team the direction to be able to enact this? And usually the answer is, we could do more. So we help support that by delivering the employee engagement piece. So we might have come up with a strategy, but this is not yet operational or tactical. And it's best to get the input from the people that are at the coalface actually delivering this. So do it all again. And you do it with your people at the very coalface of what it is that you're doing, because then they will totally own it. There is nothing worse than beers and pizza on a Friday because the directors have got a new idea. Not only are you stopping me from going back to my family, you've got an idea and I don't think it's going to work because it's not my idea either. So come Monday, we're going to scrap that and we'll carry on doing what we've always done. And we'll get what we've always got and nothing will change. We've all heard every single one of those comments, haven't we? So that's why we do it with them. We help them own that plan and then we start to deliver it. And then we work it backwards. Right, are they now delivering the KPIs that the directors give them the direction for? The exec, as directors, are you now delivering what it is that the shareholders want? And working back, when is it that appetite will now change and move forward? And it is a constant journey, backwards and forwards, shareholders, through exec, through our employees. So that's the 10th step. Does anybody have any questions before I give you a little bit of a final poll to give me?
Did you just want to check? Did you call the step battle cry? Was it battle cry?
It was a bit of I call it the battle rhythm, which is okay. So when will it actually stop? So if you take the old adage, and I'm full of adages, me, right? Everybody's got a plan until they get punched in the face, right? But if you really take that as you will get punched in the face. You will have a plan and it will fall flat on its face. So what are we going to do after that? Amanda, you gave an inkling to my military connections earlier on, so I'll give you something. So the parachute regiment, everybody's heard of the paras, and they have a little adage that they call plan the jump, jump the plan, but don't fall in love with the plan. And the point is they'll plan everything meticulously and they will do it meticulously. But the second it goes wrong, they won't rest on their laurels. They will change the plan and they will do it again. There is nothing worse than just going, well, we had plan A and there was nothing, that we wanted to do in plan B, because of course plan A was perfect. You will get punched in the face. What a stark comment to leave on there. So, from everything I've told you so far, out of all those 10 steps, imagine that you were doing this for yourself, and you absolutely could. You could do the 10 steps on a single piece of paper. You don't have to go to great detail all of the time. When is it, once you've come up with your great strategy, when is it that you'll get punched in the face? Because that's when that piece of paper that you printed off goes in the drawer and you come up with plan B and you try and do something different. So tell me in the chat, when is it that you'll get punched in the face? When your guard isn't up, Rob? Yeah, absolutely. Possibly all the way through. I like that. Jamila, how do you keep focused on the 10 steps? You're absolutely right. So the 10 steps is not a standalone process. It's not a thing that you're going to do and then go back to business as usual. Ultimately, business doctors, if we hear business as usual, we stamp it out straight away. We only do business as usual. The 10 steps is business as usual. It is your responsibility to look after the business and to grow it. If you don't grow, you'll go backwards, right? So how do you do it when you're being pulled in different directions, which is your question? You make it part of your battle rhythm. It is totally normal. You will be punched in the face, and you make it totally normal to do your 10 steps. I got asked the other day is how often should you do a senior management meeting? And ultimately, the answer is, well, when does the last one lose its effect? Because that's the time to do the next one. If you're just doing it based on time, our quarterly senior management meeting, okay, well, you've just defined it by something that isn't a definition of success in your business. So you haven't made the link to one of your first steps. So business as usual is the 10 steps, and 10 steps is business as usual. Justin, you've said that anywhere in the critical success factors, perfect. Well, now you've got the 4 things that you know that will trip each other over. Colin, when under pressure, your reminder of gratitude is important. Yeah, absolutely. And we certainly don't do that in the SME world, do we? We don't like being positive towards ourselves. Perfect. Okay. What I want to do now is I'm going to share with you a story. And it's actually a story about a charity organisation. And I want to show you how the 10 steps actually had quite a profound effect on them. And the charity is based in Rugby, so in the Midlands, and it's who I wasn't working with at the time. I just knew the chairwoman that was the head of the trustees, and the charity was Percival Guildhouse. So to give you the background, Percival Guildhouse gives tutoring, but it's face-to-face tutoring. It hadn't gone online. It's all face-to-face, and it's extremely high quality. And it was quite early in the morning. I got a phone call from Cartern, and she was quite panicked. And she said, Ryan, I don't know who to call. I don't even know what I'm about to say. I'm just going to let it all come out my mouth. And ultimately, she proceeded to tell me how she had gone through all of the finances ready for the trustees meeting the next day. And she said, I've suddenly realised that we're 99 years old and we don't actually have the forecast to make it to our centenary. We don't actually have the money. COVID has really killed us, and cash flow won't make it for us to be able to even have that party. I think I'm going to have to tell the trustees tomorrow that we'll have to close the organisation, the charity. And I felt terrible. I felt absolutely terrible. And of course, it's a charity, so you want to do your absolute best. So straight away, I went round there. So she's not too far away from me. We went round there and said, right, okay, the very first thing we're going to do is we're going to do what we call the 10 steps. And I know that sounds really cheesy, but it's the best way that right now, ahead of your trustees meeting tomorrow, is that I can make the best possible effect for you. And so we started with why. I said, right, you're a charity, you have a constitution, where is it? I have no idea. We've got a bit of a trustees agreement of what the trustee has to do, but we don't have a constitution. I said, right, okay. Out of curiosity, let's jump in the car. We're going to go down to the library in Rugby. And we actually found the book that is the constitution of that charity, because I knew it existed. And it's actually called Next to the Library, because this charity owns its own Grade 1 listed building. It's absolutely beautiful. It's in the centre of Rugby, and it's right next door to the library. And I knew I'd seen it before. So that was our why. We went all the way back to our links with Rugby School, which some of you may know is a private school. And it was set up by one of the college attendees that wanted a place to study. And that was the whole point, that it was all a building. So we did that. That was the why. We then went through our purpose and a destination, what it is that we want to do, and we kept it really simple. We want to turn around our cash flow to make it to 100 years old and turn into a growing charity that doesn't need to blame COVID anymore. That was it. That was what we wanted to do. We continue with our purpose of delivering a core offer of modern foreign languages to a really high standard. So then we started going through the steps. We had a look at future proofing, what lies ahead of us. And we spent an awful lot of time on Know Your Market. So we dragged out so much analysis, everything that we got from all the previous reports, all of the notes. As you can imagine, as a charitable organisation, everything was documented, which was really good. But it meant that there was an awful lot to pore over. And I'll cut to the chase on the analysis. They were using their Grade 1 listed building that was absolutely beautiful, that had very small rooms, and they were employing world-class tutors to deliver face-to-face to very small groups. And they saw that as a challenge, because they saw that it was really expensive tutors that could only deliver to really small groups. So therefore, the margin was tiny. But they'd missed the point. They'd missed the point on the demographic. They'd missed the value proposition. If I was learning a modern foreign language, I wouldn't want to do it in a room of 500 people. I'd want to do it in really small groups where I get as much FaceTime and support from my tutor. They's absolutely world class. So they'd missed that value proposition piece. And that was really, really important. What they'd also missed is the demographic. So their key marketing was to use the local council, who were then referring from the NHS people that were lonely. And it was massive. Everybody was coming because they wanted to be part of something face-to-face post-COVID. So what we actually found is, if you really looked at that demographic, they were absolutely more than happy to pay triple what they were already paying, because of the quality of what they were getting. And they totally missed that demographic. So that's exactly what we did. We just changed the framing of what it is that we're offering. And then finally, what we did in the driving the results bit is we had a look at what was the culture between the trustees and what they were bringing to the party and the staff that were in the centre at the time. And actually, we weren't working as a team. And that was the biggest part that we needed to do, because the understanding of where we were going and the projects that we needed to deliver were just constantly, we're a charity, we're running out of money, we can't afford to do any of those things. So we just had to have a good investment plan that made it to that centenary. Now, that sounds like a lot of work, and the trustees meeting was the next day. And I tell you absolutely no lie, I spent the whole day with Cartern from that very morning that she rang me. I then put together the full replay overnight. I did not go to bed, and I went to the trustees meeting at 9 o'clock the next day to give them the replay of, this is everything that we've just done with Cartern over the last 24 hours. This is what I'm telling you that we've talked about. And actually, here's a whole plan of how we can do it. And the result was, absolutely, we're going to do it. And I'm really pleased to say that Percival Guildhouse continues to operate today. They've had their centenary, and it's really, really exciting for them. So that's how the 10 steps can have a really quick effect. And a bit of a summary for you. So we have a few minutes left. Anybody got any questions?
Well, if there are no questions now, and there is any snake or any ladder that you might be wondering about, is that a snake or is it a ladder? Because they could be both, right? Please, please. I think, Chris, you're going to pop Ryan's email address into the chat and my email address as well. Because as a business doctor, Ryan can help you with those questions. If you've got any questions at all for any of us at Uspire, you are now part of our commercial leadership community. Please do either email us or give us a shout. LinkedIn, we're all on LinkedIn. If you need to speak to us there, please do connect in with, if you are a Business Doctors client or a friend of Business Doctors, link in with the Uspire team. And if you are a Uspire, if you're a Uspire friend or connection, please do link in with Ryan. We've got a few things that we're going to send you. Chris is going to send you an infographic, which has got all 10 of the steps in a lovely infographic, just in case you were so busy listening to Ryan's stories that you didn't get them all. I missed them all when I got onto a story, I have to say. And so please grab that. You will also have an invitation to join our next webinar, which is on the 10th of September. And that webinar, I'm going to be running that webinar, and it's around team coaching, how to get the best out of your team. Got 2 brilliant guests. Look out on LinkedIn, you'll see those. We would also love you to come to our next Uspire Live. Again, you'll see an invitation to that. And Chris is also going to send you the brochure and some of the key elements of our Uspire network, which is a network of leaders which we run in various regions in the country. I am going to say thank you so much. What a brilliant success that has been to hear what our business doctor colleagues' 10 steps are. And I certainly am going to be starting thinking about the ladder. I'm going to go ladders first, but there's definitely some snakes in my business that I think it's a really helpful thing to think about. So listen, thank you so much, Ryan. And I really hope this is the first of many collaborations in our webinars. So goodbye, everybody.
Brilliant. Thank you all.
Thanks, Ryan.